This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast, presented by ClutchPoints, powered by DraftKings. Like, follow, and subscribe. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all that other fun stuff. Please rate us, review us. That's how you support the movement that is. My name is Sheldon Alexander, and I'm joined, as always, by my dude, Matt Russell, sports betting professional and creator of The Window. Available on Substack and wherever you get your podcasts. Mr. Matt Russell, I'm not going to lie to you. Right before I hit the record button, it kind of made me sad because you acknowledge the fact that there are only 3 games left in the NFL season. And it hit me. I was like, wait, what? I know it seems obvious as we're here on championship weekend, but wow, I wasn't ready for that. How are you? How are you since you've just tormented me and I'm just like sad? The vibes
I don't know why. I don't know why I did that, but yeah, man, I always sort of say like, this is really kind of the last real football day, even though, we've now hit the point where we're starting games at 3:00. So as we said last week, right, you got to find something else to do. I don't know why. I had to do that right before you hit record. I had another thing that I wanted to tell you actually, and might as well tell the little story here for everybody here, because if you can kind of hear it in my voice, right? I got a little bit of a man cold here as the season winds down. I always say like the immune system finally just gives up towards the end of the season. My niece, she's about like 12 years old. She had this homework assignment for like gym class, and she had to research, quote unquote, what the 5 positions are in the NBA. I know you're a big basketball guy, so I'm like, gotta tell Sheldon this story. And she had to come up with she had to find out what the 5 positions were in the NBA, and she needed an example of each one. So she, texts my wife. She's like, can I call Uncle Matt and ask him this homework question? And so we go through it, and so we were, telling about all the positions and the players and stuff. And we're like, okay, what do you want to do for center? And we're like, let's use Victor Wembanyama, right? And so we're like, and we got her to spell Wembanyama because she didn't really know who Wembanyama was, but she could do it off of hearing us say Wembanyama, and she spelled it correctly, except as she's going through it, she's like Wemban, and then she threw a D in there, Wembanyama, and we had to give her sort of leeway because I probably said it with a D in there because of the cold that I have. So if anything comes out a little weird today, and there's just random D's getting thrown into different words, don't worry. I do know that there's not a D in Wembanyama, and I do know that there's not a D in God knows whatever word I might say. So, we're fighting it a little bit here, but listen, we only got 2 more games left, right? So we got plenty of time to look up Jared Stidham with a D. Clips, breaking down the Jared Stidham tape from 3 years ago was the last time he played. So, man, tons of time to get these 2 games on point. We had, we'll get into the record here for you, against the spread in a second, but against the spread stuff last week was tough. But we went on a little 9-0 prop heater over at the window to make up for it. But you're like, how are we getting the props right when we can't get the side or total? We had the Broncos. I think you had the Broncos too last week, right? And then, I had the under in Seattle and San Francisco, which nailed the handicap to a T, unfortunately for your Niners, but doesn't help that 10 seconds in, just 7 points go on the board. That's never going to help the total. And so when you hit all these props, it's because you've got the game script, if you will, sort of nailed, and then just weird stuff happens, which, we'll get into here as we talk about these games going forward. But, if you have one thing correct, you probably should have a little bit more than that. But
I think the lesson here, and I was thinking about mentioning this just as I was planning out the pod, but I think the lesson here, if you follow the pod, if you listen to the pod, we come on here and I talk about the record for the whole year, but we know that the overall purpose of why we talk about this in the way that we do is for weeks like last week so I'll tell you, I was 1-3 last week, right?
Yeah.
So if we say, okay, Broncos, cool. Niners, we all know what's going on there. Cool. But the Patriots Texans game, I think the actual thing was, hey, all over the Texans defense. The only thing that makes me nervous is CJ Stroud. And it's like, well, he can't be that bad, can he? And then he's like, hold up.
Yeah. Shell, if he was as bad as he was against the Steelers, the Texans win that game.
Yeah.
And we were like, like as you said, we were like, he can't be that bad. And it's like, well, even if he was just that bad, meaning like drop a few balls behind the line of scrimmage, maybe don't recover one or two. It's like, where do I sign up for that retroactively?
Yeah.
And it gets like 5 times worse.
And honestly, when was the last time you watched a playoff game and there was an actual like first take episode that breaks out at halftime because it's should they bring in the backup quarterback? Like, that's how bad it was. And there's a legitimate argument to be made, right?
There's such a legitimate argument made to go to Davis Mills. I'm not sure what the argument is for not going to Davis Mills, because the argument was allegedly that you ruin CJ Stroud, like his life, his career, if you go away from him. But like, number one, if that's all it takes to ruin your guy, like, I don't know that $300 million is the answer for that player, right? Like, if he is that weak, that's the next move. 2, like, Davis Mills isn't like, I'll use Jared Stidham as an example, just based on experience level, or, you know what I mean? Like, play level. Like, Davis Mills played a fair amount. He's been a topic of conversation on this podcast for more than a few games this year, right? And all of a sudden, our take going back to, I don't know that Davis Mills is really that much worse than CJ Stroud, is really starting to look pretty good, right? And it certainly did even at the time, as the Texans won games anyway. And also, like, if they replace Stroud with Davis Mills and he brings them back and they win the game, like, you've also then seen that maybe Stroud isn't the guy anyway. And maybe even if it isn't Davis Mills, it's just more like, if Davis Mills can do it, then like somebody else probably can other than CJ Stroud, right? So the thing is just multi-layered as far as like, beyond the fact that you just look at everybody else in the locker room who are just playing their, asses off, and you just go like, we're just going to run this guy back out there. And, he hits a couple of slant routes or whatever. And it's like, oh, like they might, be able to do this. Yeah, but man, like that was a brutal discussion at halftime, and that was a brutal decision for D'Amico Ryans there. Like, I mean, what else do you need, man? 4 interceptions in the first half, and you still can't get benched again. Like, what message does that send to everybody else? So just an absolute train wreck across the board there.
And that defense was playing so good. That's how crazy. Like, the fact that they were almost able to like drag them to even stay in the game was crazy. But I say all this to reference a point of a 1-3 record based off of a historically bad quarterback performance. And then the Rams at -3.5. And I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah.
That game, as the Rams took the lead, I looked at the bet and I said, should I cash this out?
Yeah.
And I'm like, nah, I can't see them like actually driving down the field and scoring a touchdown. Right? Like, I'm like, for them to come down and score the touchdown, I'm like, nah, I'm going to let this one ride. And to be honest, they start driving and you're like, okay. But then by the time it's that 4th down play and you're like, all right, I feel pretty good about this. They're like struggling to get down the field. It's not like they got right down there. So a couple 4th down plays, they convert on, you're like, whatever. But then that last one, he's like running backwards. And when he threw it up, I was like, okay, this is good. And then the cuts, and my guy is wide open in the back of the end zone. And I'm like, hold on, how does that happen? How is he like not wide open? Like, what is going on?
Yeah,
I've never seen that before. And I love his safety partner that's automatically just calling for a push off. And I'm like, it's got to be a push off. Wait, there's no flag. Show a replay. They didn't show a replay.
Well, to like the 4th replay where it was finally like, let's go to, I think that camera's probably like on the goalpost, right? Where it's like close enough from that side angle and you're looking at it and you're like waiting for this massive push off. And you're like, oh, there's not even anything to be like mad about. Like if I was a Bills fan, I would probably be mad about it because Bills fans like to make up penalties, or like make up penalties that are shouldn't been called, that were
Shots
called, or
fired.
were called that shouldn't been called. Yeah. So two things on that. Like one, yeah, like when I was thinking about this like podcast appearance, I was like, it's funny that we're going to get to sort of last week's stuff, and then like the two of us are just going to look at each other and be like, and then that game, like there isn't even really
Yeah.
much to say as far as like Rams -3.5 being like a really good bet. But like as we've talked about a lot over the course of this season, this has been the season that have just been, when I talk about like bad luck, like that's kind of what it looks like.
Mhm.
And this season has been such that type of improbable play. Like we always say, like, being on the wrong side of these miracle plays is like a good thing from a long-term betting perspective, but it just sucks in the moment because
Yeah.
you're like, oh, like, like I
Yeah.
want to be celebrating that miracle too. But I've seen so much, and I've seen so much from Caleb Williams. When he starts running backwards, I felt good about it.
Mhm.
But I swear to you, when he turned and threw, my first instinct was, oh no. And it shouldn't have been. He's
But it's just
literally
what
got
he
his,
does.
he's literally square to the goal line, heels on the 40-yard line, flinging a ball in minus a billion degree weather. It's like, it doesn't make sense that the ball would get there. I sort of described it on my podcast as like an angels of the outfield type situation where like the ball was supposed to land on the goal line,
Yeah.
but like a like whatever blow of wind all of a sudden pushes the ball like 7 more yards, and that's why the DB like completely misread where the ball was going to go, like that type of like
Yeah.
miracle type situation.
It just
Because
made
like
no
how
sense.
else, right? And then of course, you're agape. You're like, I cannot believe that he could be standing there with such ease to catch that ball. Like how that's not at the very least, oh, he's a 6'6" tight end who's bigger than the 5'10" cornerback
Yeah.
and out jumps him, right? And sort of like a mini Hail Mary type situation. And so you're just kind of like, yeah, like if I hadn't seen this a million times, or at least feels like a million times, out of the Bears and Caleb Williams, like I would be more sort of offended by the whole thing. But the
Yeah.
other thing is, I did look to see what the money line and what the deal was with the Bears,
Mhm.
and I think money line was like plus 260 when the Rams went up by 7 there. And so I didn't do it. I didn't play the,
Yeah.
the Bears. I didn't play the spread. I was just like, you know what? Let's sort of see this. If they get me again, they get me again, and they got me again. But what it actually did for me is the next day, we talked about the national championship game last week, and that ended up sort of coming to fruition, right? Where it was
Yeah.
like, yeah, these two teams are two of the 3 or 4 best teams, and it makes sense that they would play a close game, and so on and so forth, right? And so when Indiana was up 3 and had the ball,
Yeah.
I went and looked at the line, and it was -3.5 at plus 150. And I
Ooh.
was like, I'm fresh off of this thing happening
Mhm.
with Williams the night before. And I'm just like, you know what? Like, we're going to try to middle this thing. Like, I don't, we'll see. And there's a couple of different ways that you can middle it too. Cause it's like, well, if Miami gets a stop, gets the ball back, kicks a field goal, we go to overtime. Now plus 8.5 is good to go there. And of course, there's the possibility that Indiana wins by 6 or 7. And then, of course, the game plays out and they end up kicking a field goal to
Mhm.
go up by 6, win by 6. I end up middling the game. But I don't know that I would have done that if
Yeah.
it wasn't the kick in the teeth, from the night before and maybe a couple of others over the course of the last few weeks. So, again, if you sort of, as we say, right, stay ready, you can kind of turn these sort of negatives into positives sometimes. And again, you need a little luck in the same way that you take some bad luck. And so when Indiana, decided to kick that field goal to go up 6, it was like, yeah, all right, like finally, something kind of went our way here, and we are able to win both sides of that bet. So it made that a lot more palatable. That Bears miracle play, and of course the eventual cover, because I mean, God forbid the Rams score a touchdown in in overtime, right? Like, it's like, yeah, it's all
Well, they
possibility
threw it up
technically.
twice, and I was like,
Well, they
that was
won the
close.
coin toss, or like they
Yeah.
got the coin. I never know whether winning or losing the coin toss anymore means you have the ball first.
Yeah.
I haven't quite figured out what the right idea is on that, but
Neither
like, yeah,
have
they
they.
get neither have they. Yeah, you're right. And yeah, so they get the ball first, and then even when they get the ball the second time around with the third possession, it's like, like, yeah, they're throwing it deep. I had anytime touchdowns on both guys that they threw it to.
Yeah.
So like I was a little, again, double chapped that neither of those guys came down with the ball. I was like, man, I feel like if I didn't want them to score, they probably would have there. But anyway, that's just kind of where you're at, right? Where it's like, again, you just another game, stay ready. Like just at the very least, check to see what, I never sort of say cash out because they always kind of jam you on the cash out price, but always see what the line is, the live line is, and maybe there's a middle opportunity there for you. Because again, we talk about getting into the right spot with your bets and being in a beneficial position to get miracled against.
Yeah.
But like sometimes that means that you can win both bets if you sort of play it the correct way.
Yeah, and I think the big thing, as I was saying, right, is just like the lesson learned here about, I'm going to show you here a 1-3 record last week, but the way that we just discussed those last two games, and again, we're talking about the Niners game, like it's just understanding more of what we're talking about on a deeper level than, as you say all the time, whatever a record might be as we look into it. But again, championship weekend, we are here. The 3 games left in our NFL season, which is very sad, I must say. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. But championship weekend starts in the AFC. We got the New England Patriots heading to Denver as 4.5-point favorites against the Broncos. Of course, the initial question right off the bat is if Bo Nix was in this game, what would the spread be? That's what I would ask you. But first, I'm going to say, I think I would probably be on the Broncos if Bo Nix was in this game, but he's not.
Okay.
So I'm not on the Broncos. And the main reason why is because I like laying my money with things that I know, people that I know, people that I'm familiar with. If this was a regular season game, maybe I might still be on the Broncos here. But the backup, I don't know. The stakes to me seem too high for 1 week of practice to come in here and beat Vrabel and whatever scheme defense he'd be able to scheme things up. I could throw some blitzes at you because no matter what you're practicing, you're not beating the live feeling of blitzes coming at you.
Real speed. Yeah.
Real speed games, as you mentioned already. My dude hasn't played in 2 years? A live game in 2 years? I mean, come on now. It just seems like a lot to me here, right? And while you can throw blitzes, you could disguise defenses, you could do all these things. I just don't know how Stidham is going to react in the AFC Championship game with 1 week of practice. I don't know how much I don't know if I can trust Sean Payton to just be like, okay, I'm going to just hand off the ball. I'm going to keep it simple. Sean Payton has the ability, and I would say the willingness to just do too much. Like, nah, we're going to be out here wilding. Like, let it rip. And maybe that's a good thing because you'll catch the Patriots off guard. Like, I don't know. But again, I don't like laying with what I don't know. So what I do know is that I feel as if, the hope here, if you are the Patriots, you're going to trust, why am I drawing a blank here? Because Bo Nix is just the only guy that's fresh in my mind. Drake May. I don't know why I just lost Drake May. But my thought here is that if you're Drake May, if you're the Patriots, you're going to just say, hey, quick passes, get the ball out quickly. Do not sit in that pocket. Do not turn the ball over. We have a run game. Try to establish the run. And we can try to hold this down against a defense or against an offense that has their backup quarterback. You should be able to win this game if you are the New England Patriots. Now, win the game, cover 4.5, 2 different things. I understand that. But I'm going to trust in the Patriots here, and I'm going to lay the 4.5 points on the road in Denver with Drake May.
Okay, let's talk about trust, I think, because if the producer of this podcast was really spiteful, right? It was real, hard ass, if you will. We would now cut to all of the clips of you saying, anytime we go into a Denver Broncos game, I don't know if I can trust Bo Nix. Right? Bo Nix being out here wilding, right? It would just be, what, am I wrong, right?
Facts. 1,000% facts. But hold on, you will also reference it the last few weeks. I've acknowledged that, and I've changed my ways. I was a believer in Bo Nix the last maybe 2 to 3 weeks, something like that.
Well, I mean, yeah, they didn't play 2 weeks ago, and they haven't really played a real game in, since mid-December. But yeah, sure, fair enough. We can put you on the Bo Nix bandwagon if you like. My point in all of this, right, is the very sort of simple idea, because you're not the only one who's sitting around going like, I don't know if I can trust Bo Nix, because as we talked about last week, before their week 12 bye for the first 11 weeks of the season, the Broncos had like the fifth worst offense in the entire NFL, right? But they won games anyway because by and large, most of the time their schedule was pretty weak, or the defense was one of the top defenses in the league. And as we talked about last week, things kind of shifted after the bye week, where the Broncos offense got better, but the defense got actually a little bit worse, right? Where it was no longer kind of in the top five from an EPA per place perspective. And so, but so the big picture element here is, right, if like the concern all along here for 2 years since they sort of drafted him higher than anybody kind of thought, was that like Bo Nix was the weak link, if you will, or the thing that people were worried about. And as I said last week, I was like, I'm probably a little higher on Bo Nix relative to market, and I'm probably a little lower on Sean Payton relative to market, right? Like if they each had their own market rating of them specifically. Well, now we get to sort of see that, right? Because the Bo Nix effect, or not having him, is going to change the overall market rating for the Denver Broncos, which is kind of wild to me, given the fact that, like, again, the populace hasn't really thought that much of Bo Nix. And so now all of a sudden Bo Nix not being there is all of a sudden this catastrophe. And it's all because, as you say, right, like we don't know what Jared Stidham is going to do. But in sports betting, we kind of like to traffic in the unknown, especially if we do have enough kind of have enough information about the player that is going to replace the starting quarterback. Because as you and I talk about, right, all the time, the market rating changes for these teams. And so you say, like, where were the Broncos, where was this line going to be? Well, the Broncos, as you can imagine, having closed, like we talked about last week, as we're watching, the Bills, start as favorites against the Jags, drift to underdog. Same thing against the Broncos, right? So the Broncos end up closing that game -1.5, same thing that they did against, with the Jags last week. So they end up having the same rating as the Bills last week. In both cases, that rating would be slightly higher than the Patriots, meaning that if you take a team slightly better, you put them at home, you're probably looking at a -2 type situation, 1.5, maybe -2.5 type deal. We certainly weren't going to be getting 3 with the Patriots, but with Bo Nix, you're going to get the Broncos as a small favorite. Well, now we're talking about like a full 6-point swing, which, like, if you want to translate it from a rating perspective, I'm not even going to make you guess, Shell. I'm not going to do that to you this late in the season. But the old Denver Broncos rating was probably around 64, right? Maybe it would have gone up to 65 because they get that win over the Bills. This rating that puts them as 4.5-point underdogs here has them at a 40. Okay. So the question is are the Broncos now going from a better than average team, again, a sort of division winning potential type contender, to all of a sudden a below average team just because Bo Nix is not in the lineup? And your answer might be like, yeah, that's how I feel about it. So I go, okay, what is our expectation from Jared Stidham? So if I told you, Shell, that this is going to be the stat line for Jared Stidham, my guy's going to get sacked 5 times. He's going to throw an interception. He's going to have 2 fumbles. He's going to lose one of those fumbles. What would you say? It's probably a rough performance, right?
I would say that's probably what Drake May did last week.
That's exactly what Drake May has done the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
And so Drake May did that at home, right? Against pretty venerable defenses, right? Mm-hmm. Chargers and the Texans, but you're at home, right? No crowd noise. And again, it's not Drake May's fault, right? Particularly on these fumbles, because he's got offensive line is getting whipped by these defenders.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to go on the road for the first time in the playoffs, right? And so once we talk about in the regular season, these teams that play, like, especially off the start of the season, right? You play your first 2 games at home, you're looking pretty good, and you go on the road. Now all of a sudden, like, we're talking about a change of scenery, change of setup. We're talking about a loud, mile-high crowd here, and you're not able to hear the snap count. How's that going to work for Will Campbell and company, right? And so if we just saw the 5 sacks, 2 fumbles, and an interception version of Drake May, like, it's supposed to get better than that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that would be a really incredible turn of events. And so even if that's the bar for Jared Stidham, now we're talking about an equal playing field here, right? Where both guys are getting sacked, both guys are throwing a pick, and both guys are fumbling the football.
Yeah.
But you're giving me 4.5 points with the Broncos under this circumstance? And again, like that's a pretty low bar for Jared Stidham to even crawl over. Again, I'm no sort of big Sean Payton fan. Even last week, right? He's calling plays for the tackle, for the touchdown. He's, coming out against, again, we talked about it last week with the Jags game. He's coming out against a Bills defense that can't stop the run. He's like, let's throw it. And it's like, guys, how are we not getting this? And so he's doing everything that he possibly can to impress us, to make us realize that Sean Payton's an offensive genius. You could see there was a glint in this man's eye when he was telling the world that Bo Nix wasn't going to be able to play and Jared Stidham would be able to play. But what do we know about Jared Stidham? We know that he's been in the system as the backup quarterback for 3 years. He's been in the system longer than Bo Nix has. Mm-hmm. It's a guy with a big arm, right? Highly recruited guy. Like when Baylor was kind of really going and getting athletes somehow before NIL, right? Jared Stidham was at Baylor and did well enough that Auburn, SEC school, he actually preceded Bo Nix at Auburn. And like this guy isn't some like untalented joker, right? 4th round pick to the Patriots. And again, Tom Brady at the time, right? You felt like, maybe Brady's got a couple years left. Brady's like, no, dude, I got 7 years left or whatever, 6 years left. And so like that was never kind of going to work out in that way. And then he sort of catches on with the Raiders, plays a couple of pretty good games there, and enough for Peyton, again, even before he drafted Bo Nix, who again, obviously has been in the system for 2 years, was like, you're going to be my backup quarterback. Now you might say like, why wouldn't they just make him the starter? Well, if you're going to ride there in that sort of way, of course, as we know, the organization at that time goes and gets Russell Wilson. Catastrophic move in that department, right? So Stidham kind of, there's an expectation from the Broncos that they're going to use a 1st-round pick on a quarterback. But I think they also used the 1st-round pick on Bo Nix because they thought, if he's not ready to go week 1, we at least have this guy that could play in his stead. Now, it's unfortunate for the Broncos that in a weird way, that Bo Nix has not gotten hurt up until this point. So you see all these quarterbacks getting hurt
until his coach decided to make a design run late in the game.
And by the way, exactly. Now they're like, hey guys, see how smart I am. Check out the designed run I'm going to use. Like my quarterback's as good as Josh Allen. Like, just watch. And it's like, no, man, like that's not really what the deal is here. So, but my point is like, not all these backup quarterback situations are the same. And again, we talked about Davis Mills earlier. And what was the reason that we liked Davis Mills as a potential decent, not big downgrade, if you will, from CJ Stroud in the middle of the season? It's because he's been with the team for so long. And like in a league where, there's a coaching carousel, but there's also a quarterback carousel. And so if you're just the backup, like you can find somewhere else to go. Right? Some other team will kind of give you a chance or whatever, unless that team that you're on likes you enough to pay you sort of at the top end of a backup salary. And that's the situation with the Broncos, right? They made this point to be like, let's lock in the backup quarterback, again, at the time for Russell Wilson. And obviously there was a demand for like, really, let's go out and get like a young quarterback. Like we can't just, get rid of Russell Wilson, then go to Jared Stidham. Like this is not going to like work in the messaging to the fan base, et cetera, right? But like the man's like talented, right? And was like a good runner in college. He's a little bit older now, right? So I don't expect him to be like running a ton. And maybe honestly, that would be pretty helpful. And by the way, if it forces Sean Payton to maybe dial it back a notch and not get so like loosey-goosey with it, like, why? How is that a bad thing?
That's
right?
a positive.
Yeah. And so again, like we're talking about a value change here on the Patriots because of 2 home wins where the quarterback, if they hadn't won those games, we would be having some pretty significant conversations about like this guy who like is a top 2 at worst vote getter probably for MVP is all of a sudden like getting sacked and fumbling the ball all over the playoffs. But just because the other team was so incompetent in both scenarios, like they managed to advance. And now all of a sudden they're 4.5-point favorites on the road here. Listen, this game could come down to like what you do with the turnovers that you get, because I would expect both teams to turn the other team over because of the nature of these guys. But by the way, in the times that Stidham's played, he hasn't been a turnover factory, right? Like there's been some misses and some efficiency that hasn't necessarily been there, but he takes shots deep, right? In his 2 games with the Broncos again, before Nick's got there 3 seasons ago at the end of the season, he had 4 pass plays of over 25 yards. Like it's a guy like he can run the offense, like, and he's throwing to the Suttons and the little Jordan Humphreys, right? In the first, go around for little Jordan Humphrey, our guy, plus 800 to score a touchdown last week. Whammo. So just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean it's not going to work. And with some of these other backup quarterback catastrophes that we see throughout the league, like there's usually some pretty big signal that it's not going to work. Either like the offense doesn't work for the guy. Remember Cooper Rush for the Baltimore Ravens? Like that was just never going to be the right idea, right? Whereas, and then the other guys where it's like, oh yeah, we signed him like 3 weeks ago. Or it's like Carson Wentz where it's like he's played in a trillion offenses and he might not even know the plays, right? Like Jarrett Stidham can get into the huddle, call the plays because in theory, he's been studying the playbook for 3 seasons. And he can make the throws, has maybe a better arm than Bo Nix does. And, I just think like obviously there's a massive change here in rating where you're going to tell me that the Broncos are no longer a playoff caliber team. They are basically the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because Jarrett Stidham is starting. There's just nothing to say that Jarrett Stidham's going to have a bad game. I get the speed of it. Believe me, I understand that. But like, by the way, the speed hasn't been great for Drake May either, who keeps losing the football because he's not getting the ball out quick enough.
Yeah, the weird thing for me with this game is like, as much as I didn't trust Bo Nix had this like weird ability to just scramble and like make plays randomly. I'm saying randomly, but you know what I mean? Like, the playbook will break down. Part of his game is he'd be able to scramble, get a first down here and there, or scramble, extend a play, and do all that within the offense of Sean Payton that's supposed to be a lot better, but it really wasn't. So it's just a weird spot for me here. And listen. The biggest factor here of what you're talking about that I think is the most important thing is the fact of the market rating of, Bo Nix to Jarrett Stidham should not swing the line from Denver at home being 2.5 point favorites to now being 4.5 point dogs. That part I definitely agree with.
And I'll give you like a real life example, right? So when that line comes out, it's like, all right, that's obviously the curiosity, right? Like what, if you're an odds maker, right? And you're the first one to post, you're, FanDuel, DraftKings, whatever. And you go, all right, we're posting the line here. Like, what's it going to be? One, you're going to probably make it a little high on the Patriots because people are going to want to bet on the Patriots because they're not going to have done their quote unquote research on Jarrett Stidham. They're just going to kind of, think he's the guy who, I don't know if you want to call it flamed out of the Patriots or whatever, but like, circumstances were what they were in that case.
Everybody did.
And at a certain point, everybody did. It's more about the fact that like they opened at 5.5 and there was even some 6s that started to creep up.
Ooh.
And I know when I was looking at it, I was like, man, I really like +6 there. But I got a little greedy. I'm like, maybe we're not done here with the move up against the Broncos. And I was wrong. We're down to 4.5.
Yeah.
And so think about it this way, right? Do you think it's the populace that's just, arm in arm running down the street looking to bet on the Broncos here? Or do you think it's people who understand the difference between the Broncos rating before this and the rating now and being a massive gap where I shouldn't say there's no other injuries because listen, the Broncos are coming down with all kinds of like wide receiver, issues. But like, again, if that keeps things a little bit tighter for Stidham and for Payton, because like, you mentioned obviously the scrambling ability for Nix, right? And like, that'll get you, I don't know if that got them anywhere last week, but like it also prevents maybe Sean Payton from designed runs out of the quarterback position, which were negative EV plays, right? One broke his ankle entirely, but the one in the first half or the first series of the game, right? Where it's like 1st and 10 or 1st and goal from the 10. It's like, let's run Bo Nix here. And it's just like, no, dog, like that is not what we're looking to do. And the Bills are ready for that because they know that you're trying to be too cute. And so if it takes some of the too cute out of the Denver Broncos and they can be just that team that is going to beat you 17-14 against a Patriots team that is going to struggle offensively in to get their calls, to get that offensive line. It's going to be even worse for the offensive line. I can't imagine how it's not going to be. And so, again, like you're telling me that the Patriots are going to stroll into Denver and win this game by like a significant margin. Like, it is going to have to take an abject catastrophe for that to happen. Again, maybe that happens, but I don't think that's probable. And that's why we look at this stuff from like a rating perspective, because we go like, what's the probable thing that's going to happen? And the probable thing is that this is going to be a grimy game that is going to turn on one turnover and what you do with that turnover. And there's nothing to suggest that Drake May is not going to turn the ball over more than Jared Stidham.
So there's a couple things here. And I think the biggest thing, as you don't hear the gong, but the rest of the world hears the gong.
The rest of the world.
Here's the biggest thing. As I said, the market rating is a thing. I got to practice what we preach here. And the market rating is very important to this, right? And the swing, as mentioned, that's what, a 6.5 point swing in the other direction. The difference between Bo Nix and Jared Stidham isn't that. Two, I do agree with you that this might be a best case scenario for Sean Payton to simplify things and focus in on the run game and do all that stuff against a New England team that, if we're being honest, their defense looked a little bit better the last couple of weeks, but that's against who? Right? That's against CJ Stroud, right? Like the man, the myth, the legend that is CJ Stroud.
And honestly, a couple of offensive coordinators that might be out of work. One definitely is already out of work and has already been replaced with your man's money, Mike. But the other one could be out of a job here soon enough too. And as of course you mentioned, Stroud doing the absolute like least.
Yeah,
with the most, right? Or the most of the least.
Yeah. So it's just, the Patriots defense against the Broncos. Can the Broncos just scheme up some runs and get some play action passes and really simplify some things? But then on top of that, talking about getting back to basics, talking about a 6 point swing one way to the other, but also this does lead me to believe it'll be a low scoring game. And if it is, you're telling me I'm getting 4.5 points. You do really want to be on the side of the points in a game where there's a lot of stuff going on, because Drake May is going to turn over the ball, right? Like that's just a thing that is going to happen against this team, against the Broncos defense, a defense that I've been saying the past couple of weeks, I do like to trust defenses in the playoffs.
Sure.
Now defenses at home where there is a home field advantage, I got to practice a lot of what I preach here. So Denver plus 4.5. We can switch that pick. We can switch that.
Okay. We did it.
I just think it's maybe it's going forward and thinking about like what the Super Bowl would be. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, how do I get hyped for Jared Stidham in the Super Bowl? Like is that what I'm plotting my Super Bowl Sunday on? But maybe we can discuss after we talk about the next game. Is it worth it to just make a bet on the NFC now? If that's what we're thinking. I don't know what the number is. I haven't looked it up.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't looked it up, but I'm just saying, like, if that's the worry, because I think a lot of people are thinking, well, how do I get hyped up for this matchup? If it's Broncos, if it's Stidham and Sam Darnold in the Super Bowl, like, how do I do that? Right.
Yeah.
But
I get it.
I think that's part of it, but the switch is done. The pick is made, all that fun stuff. Broncos, Sean Payton, don't let me down here, man. Don't let me down, Sean Payton. We can figure this out, man. We can figure this out, Sean Payton.
Vance Joseph, don't let me down here.
Ooh, okay. Fair enough.
Vance Joseph.
Like Stephon Diggs. We have Cardi B. That's my goal. Make a clip that has Cardi B yelling on the internet about. How about that?
She gonna get no, I was gonna say, you know what I'm gonna say? Is she gonna get the cutaway treatment that a certain Miami Hurricane fan got on Monday night? We'll just leave it.
I don't know if she's going to be at the game. I wonder if she's going to be at the game.
I just wanted to reference the Miami Hurricane fan without referencing the Miami Hurricane fan.
And like the camera guy definitely did that on purpose, right?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know who it was.
Like that can't be an accident
or what she has to do with anything. But other people do. Not me.
Fair. Totally fair. I do realize it's also fair that there is another game to discuss, which is the LA Rams, the NFC Championship game, Rams Seahawks Part 3, as the NFC West just continuing the dominance of the entire conference here. Seahawks are favored by 2.5 points. I'm on the Rams here. And the main reason why I'm sticking with I've been on the Rams over the Seahawks from like the entire season. So I'm not going to change now. This is an institutional pick of McVay, Stafford, Puka, Devontae on offense versus any defense, really. And even though the Seahawks defense is one of the better defenses in the league, we've already seen them cook this defense just because of the style of play. Styles make fights, and whatever, like the defense that they run versus Matthew Stafford and the offense, and they have the ability to run where we could just get the ball out quickly. We can kind of, maneuver ourselves into a run game. You know what I mean? We can create enough of a run game to keep it back, keep some form of balance. That works. So we're talking about the MVP. We're talking about the MVP with weapons against Sam Darnold and the institution that is Sam Darnold. That I am still waiting on Sam Darnold to be the Sam Darnold that history has shown me will show up in the big moments. And I'm just not going to trust it. And most importantly, the reason why I'm not on the Seahawks is I am not falling for the boost that the Seahawks have been given for beating the San Francisco 49ers in back-to-back games, right? Like the last time we saw the Seahawks play someone not named the San Francisco 49ers was almost a month ago. And so if we're just going by them dominating a beat-up Niners team, that's not enough for me here. And I'm getting points. Give me the points. Rams plus 2.5.
Yeah. We talk about data points, right? We talk about these games like data points. And, talked last week about the Broncos. It's like, week 17 and 18, like those weren't data points because those weren't real games against the Chiefs and Chargers. So like we hadn't had a real data point on the Broncos since week 16. And so you're talking about data points with the 49ers, right? And like, those are 2 data points, but like, kind of like how I talked about it last week, man, like it's the same data point. And, that game last week, that final score was probably what the week 18 score should have been based on sort of like the play, right? Like I think, you can admit like
field
at 13
goals, missed field goals.
It's like, right. At 13-3, like that's not really what the product we saw on the field wasn't a 13-3 type of game. It was probably closer to like a 3 touchdown type of game that like the 49ers were able to, again, miss field goals, 4th downs and stuff like that.
And within that, though, to your point, though, I think the bigger part of that is that Brock Purdy's not Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams are not the Niners weapons at receiver. Like, do you know what I mean? 100%. And so like they weren't able to score, and like that furthers your point, I think.
Right. Yeah. And I'm just saying that it's like, we can play that game and you want to play 49ers Seahawks again? Like it's probably going to look the same, whether it's a 10-point win or a 35-point win. Like, I can tell you that, but like, it's probably going to look on the field on a play-to-play basis, the same as those 2 games. And so when you say like, what am I supposed to take from those games and apply it to a game against the Rams when like they also just played this game, quote unquote, just in week 16. And the only other game in that mix, and people sort of, I guess, use this as an example, going like, well, Seattle pummeled the Panthers pretty good on the road in week 17, and the Rams like barely got by the Panthers, in the wild card weekend. So it's like, well, maybe that's also why the Seahawks are quote unquote better. And so, I had this is part of the handicap, it's part of the plan. So I hope I'm not spoiling anything as per your referencing, like talking about the, the Super Bowl lines or whatever. But, it is part of it because if you look, there are look ahead lines for the Super Bowl. All 4 combinations are out there. And what you'll note here is that the combinations are the exact same. Meaning that against say Denver, for example, the Seattle point spread is the exact same as the Rams point spread.
Yeah.
And against the Patriots, the Seattle point spread being the favorite, spoiler on that, is the exact same as the Rams being the favorite against the Patriots, right? Which tells you what? That these 2 teams are rated equally. Like if there's no difference in the point spread against the same opponent on a neutral field, what else do you need to know, right? And so what that also is sort of telling us here, that is if these 2 teams are rated equally, number 1, line's minus 2.5. You're giving 2.5 points of home field advantage to the Seahawks. Well, Shell, you and I know in 2026, like the most anybody's getting for home field advantage is like two, and that's like genuine circumstance, like, heat of Miami the first couple of weeks of the season, Denver, early on in the season where teams are maybe not at their absolute tip top, like stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like we don't do 2.5, 3 points anymore. And so then the other element is, as you and I have talked about all season long, and you referenced it like in the first sentence, you can say you have been on the Rams. Everybody's been on the Rams. The Rams have been the number one power rated team since, other than the Chiefs, who it was always kind of like, yeah, eventually it's going to kick in. Eventually, it didn't. But like in a more earnest way, the Rams have been the number one power rated team for largely the second half of the season. Well, now all of a sudden, like you said, the Seahawks have pulled into a tie with the Rams. They are now co-number ones as far as power rating is concerned, based on the fact that we can look at next week's Super Bowl lines and go like, yeah, they're rated equally. And again, like you said, that's all based off of one super long 120-minute data point against the 49ers, a team that has been, as of course we know, just ravaged by injury and had so little left to give. And honestly, it's worth mentioning right now just what an absolute embarrassment it was that the Eagles lost that game to the 49ers in between. Just ridiculous. Like, it's not going to be talked of enough about like coaching and organization and AJ Brown and Jalen Hurts. It's a disaster that they lost that game to the 49ers. It's just, there's no.
If Sirianni got fired after like last Monday, I would have understood.
Dudes have been fired for less, and so yeah, like the whole thing is just, it's crazy to say for a team that won the Super Bowl last year, but like the whole thing is a mess. So so first and foremost, you have to decide, like, are the Seahawks really as good as the Rams? And, listen, they won that game in week 16. Now, were they down 16 points? And some real stuff had to happen along the way there, including the Charbonnet 2-point conversion that I think people are overblowing because of the idea that, like, it's the only reason that Seattle came back. Listen, it certainly helped. But, that game was as even as it could possibly be. The Rams didn't have Devontae Adams in that game. The guy nobody's talking about because, like, he makes essentially one catch, but it's usually a pretty impactful catch per game. They didn't have Tyler Higbee wasn't in that game, right? Like, that guy's good for a 20-yard catch on a weekly basis. And so, and also does, allows the Rams to do the thing that the Rams like to do that makes them different from most other teams, which is go to a 3 tight end personnel thing and have legitimate weapons at all 3 tight end position, right? Spots on the field. So you're throwing Devontae Adams back into this mix. You're throwing those 3 tight end sets back in the mix. And that's even implying that the offense struggled against the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Which, like, it did not. So, I think they had 500 yards in that game. Obviously, overtime, sort of helped that. But, like, even a 400-plus yard regulation time effort, like, they had no problem against the Seahawks defense. And the Seahawks defense was pretty healthy in that game. Like, they've had guys in and out of the lineup, but they were pretty healthy for that game. And so I just look at it and I go, yeah, man, like, I don't really know how we got to 2.5 based on the fact that, like, that game in and of itself was 1.5. We also have talked, of course, about these two matchups where the home team was favored by less than a field goal. And the point spread came into, was a factor because the favorite won but didn't cover, despite being a 2.5-point favorite in LA. LA wins by 2. And a 1.5-point Seattle favorite in Seattle. And Seattle wins by 1, right? Like, incredibly, the points came in. I was going to sort of tag on with the Broncos game. I mentioned the idea of, like, how much kind of a bummer it would be if the Broncos made the Super Bowl with Jared Stidham. It would be hard to get excited about it, in the same way that it's hard to get excited about the AFC Championship game, because even though I think the Broncos have a chance to win that game, it's just hard to get pumped up about that game. 4.5 points is a lot of points, right? So the Patriots can win that game in a variety of ways and still not cover that point spread. And as we've seen from this matchup, like, the Seahawks can win this game without covering 2.5 points, just because that's just how close this whole deal is. So, again, the quote unquote narrative, right, where it's like, okay, you pummel the 49ers a couple of times here and they barely, again, who knows how much different it would have been if it was the Eagles advancing and the different, permutations for the playoffs in that way. But, the Rams were in tough games against the Panthers and the Bears. But like, I'm not really looking to downgrade him off of that. Like, yeah, I don't think the defense is as good as it was sort of measured to be in the first 10 games of the season, but I don't think it's also as bad as it was in the last few weeks of the season when they were down one of their like prominent defensive backs. And so, and then against the offense, people are bummed about the Rams offense. Like, I think there's like an exchange rate on offensive like points and yardage when the weather is like minus 25.
Fair.
Like
Totally
17 points in that weather is like 30 points in September weather. You know what I mean? It's like there's got to be some sort of math equation.
And you got to give some credit to the Bears defense. I think the Bears defense actually played really well. They had a great
Tyler
game plan.
Gordon, right? The big hole the week before was much better the next time around, right? And they were able to they basically took the second half game plan against the Packers, right? Let's blitz the hell out of the other team and just kind of and just get really loose with this game. And like sometimes that turns into a 42-42 type of game because the blitzes aren't getting home. And then there's other times when it's so bleeping cold out that the offense is only going to work at, like we said, sort of an exchange rate, a lower exchange rate, where it's like, yeah, man, and it's just not going to be that great sometimes. And so, like I didn't really expect much of the Rams offense last week. And, you look at the weather for Seattle, like, you think, oh, it's going to be cold and rainy. It's not really going to be either of those things. Again, forecast as of Thursday for a Sunday evening. It's not going to be that cold. Yeah. And it's going to be above freezing temperatures, which might as well feel like a warm day for the Rams after last week. And there doesn't seem to be any precipitation, believe it or not, in Seattle for the game. And so now you're talking about an offense that can maybe get back to clicking. And again, you give Seattle credit. You look at all the metrics. You look at how they played against the 49ers. And again, you're talking about game planning for the same team twice in a row with a 2-week gap.
Yeah.
Like, when do you ever get that set up, right? Like, that is just prime setup in that situation. And now it's the Rams who, again, like lit you up the first time or at least the most recent time around. And so when I talk about like the Seattle metrics, I can quote you all the good Seattle metrics, run defense, et cetera, et cetera. But then, listen, it's short sample size in the NFL, right? And I can give you all of the teams that they played and some of the quarterbacks that they played. They played the Saints when Spencer Rattler was in the mix. Yes. And that game was 21-0 before the Seattle Seahawks offense had to do anything. Yeah. They played your boy Max Brosmer in his only start of the season, right? And even that one was a close game until Brosmer got all weird on that fourth down attempt late in the first half. They played Phillip Rivers in his first game in 5 years, right? All of those games were played at home, by the way. Right. Yeah. So even if they were sort of, those quarterbacks were given the benefit of home field, you might be like, okay, well, that's a little bit better. But none of them were. They all had to play in Seattle, throw in a couple of games against the Arizona Cardinals any time of the season. Right. And then, there's the Titans game in there. And there's a couple other sort of weaker opponents and some of these. And it's like, and the teams that they played when that team was playing well, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield, slanging it around on them that day. Right. And so like there just wasn't that many scenarios where they played a team at kind of their best and brightest. One of those, and I wouldn't even say the Rams were because, again, they were without, Adams and Higbee. But like, again, one of those good offenses that they played did torch them pretty hard. Yeah. So I think there's going to be more scoring in this game than maybe the market thinks. And I don't know that we should be committing to the idea just yet that the Seattle Seahawks are the better or even equal to the Los Angeles Rams at this point.
Yeah, I've just never felt that way throughout the entire season. I don't think that now, nothing that's happened recently changes that. So that's kind of just where I'm at here. And of course, again, right, like the things that I know I would trust, McVay and Stafford more than I trust Mike McDonald. And I know he's not the offensive guy, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, and listen, we hadn't even gotten to the idea of Rams defense versus Sam Darnold going back to the playoffs last year against the Vikings, going back to the 4-interception game in the first meeting that they had. Yeah. Even, again, when they're down 16 in Seattle in the fourth quarter, you're not feeling good about the Seahawks and Sam Darnold.
For
And you
sure.
get a punt return, right, from Rashid Shaheed. Again, obviously special teams always an element when it comes to the Seahawks.
And the
And now all of a
Rams.
sudden, yeah, and they're back in that game, right? And
Yeah.
so oh gosh, I'm gonna blow. No, I can't remember who the kicker was for the Rams. Had they moved on from Cardi by week 16? I think they had. But yeah, the special teams has improved a little bit from the Rams perspective. But again, it is a dangerous unit when it comes to the Seahawks, and something that you obviously have to be worried about it. But that was the key play, right? It was the Rashid Shaheed, and wasn't the Rams like fired the special teams coach like right after the
I
game?
think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so.
that definitely happened. And yeah, and so it's like, okay, yeah, I don't know that if like he'd called for a fair catch and the Seahawks offense had gone back out there down 16, that would we ever having a conversation about this game even being in Seattle, because Seattle would have lost that game. The Rams would have, ended up as at the very least I guess they would have been the 1 seed. It was a pivotal game back then. And the Rams, by the way, if you want to do the thing about like beating a team twice or blah, 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 revenge, all of that kind of motivational sort of angle stuff, man, that's certainly in the favor of the Rams. I'm sure they came out of that game going like, if we get another shot against these Seahawks, even if it is Seattle, like we're going to take advantage of it. We're going to have Adams back, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, again, like it's 2.5 points. It's by the way, it's as we talk about this, right? Like we talk about every week, it's never getting to 3.
Yeah,
we're not getting plus 3.
Did it?
Right?
Did it open at 3 and go back down, or no?
It was it opened right at 2.5. It hasn't really moved.
Okay.
It has. I mean, a couple of cents here and there. There was a point where you could get some plus 2.5, like plus 105, and I think the adjusted plus 3, I think was like minus 122 in one spot, and I was like, I try to sort of stop and keep myself, and only got to go at minus 120. If you ever, and this is to everybody out there, if you see minus 120 at plus 3. At any point between now and game time, that's definitely a play for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm expecting a little more fireworks in this game, and that might lead me to a different bet entirely.
Yeah, I mean, this one, we've been setting up as if this was going to be the NFC Championship game for a while, right? Like you could see kind of this progression. And so that now that it's finally here, yeah, it's one of those interesting things, but it also gives us a rare opportunity, which we can peek ahead to the Super Bowl. And is there some room to maybe, make a little sprinkle here on the NFC over the AFC in any way in said Super Bowl?
Well, when you look at the stuff, right, like all of the permutations, there's only 4 permutations, right? So you can kind of figure that out and just go, all right, well, if this team plays this team, then I'd be getting a good deal if there's some sort of an upset. But because, as we talked about, whether it's Seattle or LA, like it doesn't really matter because these teams are rated the same, right? And so you can look ahead, and because Seattle's the favorite this week, they're at plus 150 for the Super Bowl, and the Rams are plus 210, right? And that's the gap between the 2.5 points that we're talking about here. The only thing that I would sort of potentially look at with regards to Super Bowl hypotheticals is, as crazy as it may sound, the Broncos plus 8.5 is, that we reference the lines, right? And so, spoiler alert or whatever, both the Rams and the Seahawks are favored by 8.5 points against the Broncos.
Yeah.
So that's the bummer, right? That we're sort of thinking about. We're going like, oh God, we're headed for a game of the Super Bowl where it's literally going to have like the highest point spread outside of Rams Panthers, of the entire play. Right. And also, by the way, like the highest point spread in a Super Bowl, that would be doing that off the top of my head, so I maybe shouldn't, but like in a very long time, I think.
Yeah.
Right. Like we're talking maybe early 2000s type of a deal. So, the only thing I would say is like, what's the one team that can drastically change their perception off of their result this week? And that's the Denver Broncos, right? Like if Jarrett Stidham plays well, the Broncos win that game outright, their market rating is going to go up. And so if you grab the hypothetical right now at plus 8.5, now I will say based on market rating, there is some already built into this, right? Like based on the market rating for each team, if say the Broncos played the Rams this week, then or the Seahawks, because again, they're interchangeable, the line would be 9.5. So they're by posting an 8.5 as the look ahead, they're already saying, well, if this game even happens, it means the Broncos were good enough that 9.5's too high, so let's go to 8.5 here. I would make the case, as we've seen with a ton of these teams, we bet some ugly situations with some ugly quarterbacks, and then the very next week we see teams that were rated like 10, 40 the next week, or 40, and they're like 55 the next week, right? So like if the Broncos win a home, playoff game against the vaunted Patriots, they're probably going to get boosted back up to like 50 or whatever. At which point, it's because, again, Stidham looked good, or maybe because the Broncos defense was so good, and yada, yada, yada. The line's probably going to reopen, even if it's 7.5. You've got an 8.5 in your pocket. Maybe the line opens at 7 and just sort of sits there because it's like, we're opening at 7. Like, if there's money coming either way, we'll move off the 7, but like, we rather just stay on the key number of 7. And by the way, if the Broncos just don't win, you get your money back. The bet gets voided. You don't lose the bet. Right? So it's like, we can go and say, well, like, bet the Broncos to the Super Bowl at 12-1.
Yeah.
But it's like, but if they lose this weekend, like, bye-bye, that bet is done.
Yes.
Right? And so these hypothetical markets, they literally says at the top, void if game doesn't take place.
Boom.
Okay, cool. So like, you're either voiding my bet, or I'm going to probably have, I'm going to have plus 8.5.
It's not going to get worse.
It's really hard to imagine the Broncos winning this game.
The only scenario would be Stidham gets hurt, and whoever
breaks
his backup
is,
whoever his backup is, he now has to play.
And
at the end of the game.
Right, like I say, with like I lost every game last week. I had a player get injured who I had a player prop on, right? Literally every single game. And the one that was sort of like really kind of not funny, was Charbonnet, Kenneth Walker. Yes. And it's like either one of them could have blown out their knee.
Yeah.
But I had Zach Charbonnet, so like by rule it had to be him, I guess.
Yeah.
And not that I'm hoping Kenneth Walker blows out his knee by any stretch of the imagination, right? But when I'm sitting there with a Charbonnet anytime touchdown bet, he blows out his knee in the first half or whatever it was, and then Kenneth Walker's running for touchdowns in the second half. I was like, I gotta tell you, I feel like Charbonnet would have had one of those touchdowns if he was still able to go. So my point being that, like, as much as it's possible that Jared Stidham gets a Bo Nix situation and they win, but he gets hurt, it's conceptually just as likely that Matthew Stafford gets hurt and the Rams, late in the game of a Rams win, or Sam Darnold gets hurt late in the game. And by the way, like, what would be better? Literally everything. But what would be better than Drew Lock in the Super Bowl against the Broncos, his former team, going up against Jared Stidham, who just vanquished the Patriots, his former team, the Stidham Lock Super Bowl? Like, I know you're hoping for a Jimmy G. I know you're hoping for a Jimmy G Super Bowl appearance. I know how well those have gone for you in the past.
Why'd you have to do that, man?
Drew Lock, Jared Stidham. Listen, man,
we're not recovered from last week's game, man. Why'd you have to do that?
We're 2 Broncos quarterback injuries, and somehow them advancing, from Ben DiNucci being the Super Bowl starting quarterback.
Yeah.
As he posted to Twitter, "Hey guys, I'm available," and then they signed him to be their third.
Who knew? That's all you got to do.
Quarterback. It feels like direct snap to RJ Harvey is probably a better option than snapping the ball to Ben DiNucci at any point. I'm convinced, by the way, that if the Texans had just direct snapped to like their running back, or if they had just done snap it to CJ Stroud, he looks at one receiver. If he's not wide open, Stroud just takes off on first and second and maybe third and long. Yeah. And then anytime they got to second, third, or fourth and short, they just ran the Cade Stover push play. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm pretty convinced the Texans would have just won that game.
He's just shook. He just shook.
I hate to bring it back around, but like, again, if we're this close to a Ben DiNucci, Drew Lock Super Bowl, or even a Jared Stidham, Drew Lock Super Bowl, who's the Patriots backup quarterback?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's a great question. Who is the New England Patriots backup quarterback?
I'm sure I know. Is this a race to see who can Google this first?
I was looking up the largest point spreads in Super Bowl history.
Oh, you're mad. Josh Dobbs, the Pastronaut. I forgot.
Josh Dobbs. That's
amazing. And their third string quarterback, Tommy DeVito.
Wow.
It's a few more injuries that we need to get to before. I mean, I guess it's
Wow.
not that many more injuries, right? But
Tommy
Tommy
DeVito.
DeVito.
Definitely forgot
Uh,
about that, dude.
yeah, Sam Ellinger, by the way, the backup quarterback for the Broncos. Sam Ellinger, Ben DiNucci,
Sam
the third
Ellinger.
stringer.
Don't remember him. Don't remember
Texas.
him. Okay.
Longtime Texas Longhorn, went to the Colts. Got a couple of starts, I think, with the Colts. Basically, the quarterback version of the direct snap. Like you just direct snap it to him, and then he
Yeah.
just sort of barrels into people. That was kind of his offense at Texas.
Okay.
This is what
Yeah.
happens in championship weekend, championship Sunday, when in the podcast after the hour mark, when there isn't two more games to go. We just start
Right.
getting into the depth chart of the quarterbacks, going like
Hey, you just never know. You just never know.
Jalen Milroe, Seattle Seahawks third string quarterback.
You just never
Another
know.
direct snap all-star.
Well, I mean, either way, I know that despite the fact that there are two games, I know that you have tons of articles and more information. And you mentioned earlier the props and how that's been going for you. So where can the good people find that from you on the interwebs?
Yeah, it was an amazing thing last week, right? We kept the Denver win on the side and go 1-2 on player props. It's like, okay, that's fine. Again, we hit the Lil Jordan Humphrey 8-1 touchdown. Talked to in the past about how some of these touchdowns that we're hitting are really awesome. I mean, we even got to the national title game and hit 3 anytime touchdowns in that game, including talk about not getting enjoying the iconic miracle moments. We had Fernando Mendoza anytime touchdown. So when that guy flew into the end zone, it was great for multiple reasons. And of course, again, fortunately, Miami came in and got the backdoor touchdown with another anytime touchdown that we had, which was Malachi Tony. But all that is to say, we then go 0-3 on side or total in the next 3 games during the divisional round, and we go 9-0 on the player props, right? So like while you and I talk about your picks for the sides, and I try steer you in some of these directions or kind of let you cook, there is so much, as you guys know, more to betting, right? And so when you have a handicap for a game that's sort of based on some of these things, right? Like Christian McCaffrey's not going to be able to run against the Seattle Seahawks defense, and he can't. We bet the under on Christian McCaffrey. It isn't rocket science, right? So especially as we get into the Super Bowl, which of course you and I will talk about in a couple of weeks, we end up having a lot of player props for that. You give me 2 weeks to research a game, my man, we are going to have a ton of bets. So whether it's every Monday and Thursday night during the regular season or every single playoff game, we have 3 player props along with our side or total, and we have the anytime touchdowns that we like. And again, the touchdowns have been going really well. We had that nice run last weekend with the player props that we're looking to keep on going. And and so all that stuff can be found over on Substack. Again, fire up the app. Fire up the website, substack.com. Anything you search in the department of Matt Russell sports betting, the window, any kind of combination of those words should get you where you need to go. And of course, at MRussAuthentic on Twitter. Everything that I write gets tweeted out through there, and you can find, home base via that way. And of course, listen, football season's almost done. We are turning attention to college basketball and March Madness. And then, of course, the Stanley Cup playoffs, which will ride us right into summertime when, before you know it, Shell, as bummed out as we are, that we only got 3 football games left. Before you know it, it'll be like, who should be rookie of the year? Who's the coach of the year? Who's offensive player of the year? Which, by the way, we still have our very exciting NFL awards night where we're hoping to get,
Can't wait.
I think we're going to get Myles Garrett announced as defensive player of the year and Teteroa McMillan for offensive rookie of the year. And man, if the universe aligns correctly and the voters have their head on straight, we'll get Puka Nacua as offensive player of the year, because I'm sorry, that guy was the offensive player of the year this year. So hopefully enough voters recognize that. And we get that announced. That'll be the big drama for NFL awards on, was that Thursday, February 7th or whatever it's going to be. So yeah, a lot of exciting stuff still left on the board, but yeah, pumped to turn the page to another sport, man. March Madness. I love me some March Madness, and that includes conference tournaments and of course the big dance.
Yeah, we're almost there. Somehow it's already the end of January. Don't know when that happened, but we're here. And you can find me online on the app formerly known as Twitter at Shell Alexander, on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. Of course, make sure you check out the podcast on YouTube, on Spotify, and of course on Apple as well. Can't forget about Apple. Don't know how I almost did that. But as I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the Clutch Picks Betting Podcast. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.